ACW is sponsored by Jabati. Self-care through skincare. Jabati is for everybody. Welcome to ACW Podcast. Thank you for joining us. I am Robin Gabriel Parson, your host, and our co-host today is Dr. Gary Gabriel. Yes, our life science expert. Our topic today is men's health. Yes, we're going to discuss men's health from self-care to sexual health. Now, before we go into discussion, I want to share something with you guys. It was very near and dear to my heart, a friend of mine. He was a colleague that advocated for men's health. And he made a statement to me, and God bless him, he passed with prostate cancer. But he said to me, men look at their health like they look at a car repair shop. I was like, what? He said, yeah. He said, men look at their health like they look at a car repair shop. And I said, why is that? He said, because they only need it when something's broken. And I'm like, wow, wait, so you only need your car repaired when something's broken. Whereas he said, women, they monitor their health differently. Every day, women are focused on their health regardless if something is going wrong or not. So our discussion today, we are going to discuss some of those myths and dismiss some of those things behind why men don't visit a doctor until there's a serious medical issue. And we have an expert here to share that with us. Welcome, Gary. So glad to hear from you again.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Like I said, I don't pretend to know everything, but I try to put my 2 cents in on what we see in science and the stuff that we see in life. I'm glad you're doing this topic because I think it's time for men, particularly I think Black men, really need to tune in to issues of health. I think I just come off of a conference about 2 weeks ago, the American Society of Clinical Oncology. And the focus of that meeting was equity everywhere, every day. And Dr. Lori Pierce, who I believe is out of the University of Michigan, is a Black woman who is this year's president of the American Society of Clinical Oncology. In that meeting, there must have been at least 15, 20 talks talking about health disparities in communities of color, with a subset of that information targeted on major health disparities, particularly with Black men. But what's interesting about that, so let me cut to the chase. No matter what cancer has been studied in science and in hospitals across the board, any cancer indication, this is no surprise that there are extreme health disparities, no matter what the cancer type is, whether it's Black men or Black women. And that's one of the things that came out of the American Society of Clinical Oncology. But for Black men, it's very interesting that the new data that's coming out, and really in this pandemic, is really showing you how much we are in a state of health system disparity, which explains why a lot of what you see in terms of how we are able to access healthcare. That's point one. Point two is, as Black folks, and your comment earlier about women monitoring their health, women are much more astute and sensitive to health issues than men. I think we're just coming into a place of understanding that, and I think there's some psychological factors. There's also stress factors where we are starting to understand the importance of monitoring our health early and often. And I think it's something that we need to talk about as men, and we need to talk about, that even leads to like sexual health, which is eventually what we'll talk about.
I am very pleased to do this subject today. I think it's very important, as you said. There's a lot of myths out there, and I'm so happy you're here to really clarify some of those things. And you as a doctor, and you as a male. So this is a really something that we have to keep this dialogue going. Now, you mentioned earlier, and the question was to you: do you feel men health receive the same attention as women health? And you kind of already elaborated on it, but can you elaborate on it more? Why is that?
Well, there's a whole range of reasons in terms of men's health and women's health, and I mean, there's so many factors. There's the whole historical factor, which kind of is tied into the psychology of what it means to be a man. And to be a man, you got to be strong. You can't be weak. And the misnomer that that checking on your health or detecting something early, or if there's some slight discomfort, that you're to suck it up and be strong. You know, we're even taught as young boys, you know, if you're out playing and you fall down and you scrape a knee, oh, suck it up, you know, be a man about the whole thing, and it's just move on. That constant reinforcement of having the tough upper lip, no matter what, has set in a psychology. So let's first set the map that we when we look at what it means to be a man, you know, the provider, the protector, the hero concept. So what that means is that you show no failings, and oftentimes showing no failings or overlooking any mild failings could mean that you overlook issues of health. And I think let's start there. So I think this is my belief. I think that's where it comes from. I think it comes from a society where even when you look at media, we reinforce the hero complex of the male, that the male is going to come in and save the day, and he's going to be strong. He won't have any failings, and if he has any failings, he'll wrap his arm in a rag, tie it up, and go on and do its thing. And we see that in media. We see that in our politics, in terms of trying to project a strong male figure, not being weak in any way, overcoming any fear. And I think it causes us as men not to sit down and say, hey, wait a minute, something's bothering me today. Hey, that hurts. That's not supposed to go that way. Maybe I should set up a checkup or get my blood work done. I'm actually going through that right now. I'm going through the whole aspect of putting aside being this ultimate provider and sitting back as a man or as a human being and saying that I'm a human being and there are health issues I must attend to if I'm going to have a quality of life. And I think that's where it comes from. I think that's where the disparity of why men don't take health seriously, because it goes against the definition of being a man.
You're so correct. You're so correct. Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, what are the leading health issues men are faced with, you find?
Well, the number one is really, I can tell you, it's cardiovascular. You know, if you look at chronic health, heart disease is the number one killer of men and women, but it's really strong with men. And again, there's a whole range of reasons. One, I just talked about, the whole psychological aspect of being a man and going against monitoring your health. If you monitor your health too much, that might be a sign of weakness. And then, or this whole provider complex. If I'm the provider, then I'll worry about my health later. But cardiovascular is a major one, and it affects so many different things. It's, you know, your cardiovascular system is very important to bringing oxygen to every organ in your body. And when that suffers, you can have high risk of things like diabetes. You're gonna there's atherosclerosis, heart disease, and there's so many different sicknesses that can range from a poor cardiovascular system. So I think that's a main thing. And as men, again, and culture, the media and the culture has also pushed this as well. What does it mean to be a man? Well, one of the things in being a man is that you sit back and you eat a lot of meat. Meat eating, beef eating man.
Right.
And we already know from scientific literature that there are a host of very dangerous compounds, very dangerous fats that can come from consuming large amounts of meat. We know that the small compounds like TMEO, which is a small compound that can rest in the cardiovasculature and really start the beginning stages of atherosclerosis, which is the build of fat and plaque in the arteries, which literally will decrease the blood flow. So it actually will also raise blood pressure. So we know that, again, let's think about the connections. The connections is we start out psychologically. And I always say that everything that we do and everything that we are has a strong psychological component. So if, as a psychological component, we believe that we are men and we're infallible and we're the providers and we're not going to show any kind of weakness, that also could transcend into not really monitoring our health, not really monitoring what we eat, because we're men and we're going to overcome anything. So if I consume a lot of meat and I say, hey, man, meat is not good for you, or consuming large amounts of meat is not good for you, you can say, hey, I'm a man. You can't tell me anything. So there's so many connections between the psychological basis of who we are as men and the health monitoring of who we are as men. And like I said, the cardiovascular aspect is a major health deficit that men are facing, and it affects so many aspects of quality of life.
Yes, yes, yes. Now, are men, based on this whole COVID thing, do you find that men are more vulnerable to the COVID-19 virus than women?
I think the data right now is still out. I think those studies are still being done. I think we're going to find out a lot of scientific factors about age differences, gender differences, racial differences. One thing that we already know, even in last year's American Society of Clinical Oncology, there was a study that was presented looking at health status of blacks and whites and other races, and hands down, if you have diabetes or hypertension, where you have there's large amounts of that in the black community, you are at higher risk for COVID. If you are a smoker, you are at higher risk for COVID. So the health deficits are already there when you look at just general quality of health. But when you look at whether men are more susceptible, I think the verdict's out. I think you can be a man or a woman, but if you have any of the negative health lifestyle factors, where or you have health impairments such as hypertension or diabetes, you're definitely at higher risk for COVID. and that's at this point, that's irregardless of whether you're male or female.
Thank you. It's interesting. It goes back to those health risk factors constantly with this COVID. Thank you for that. So You mentioned something in reference to meat. I thought that was interesting how you said men eat a lot of meat, and you're so correct. So, and I guess mainly because of the protein that they feel they get from it. But
Yeah.
what are some of the healthy foods that are good for men when it comes to making sure they're sustaining their muscle mass, or because
Yep.
again,
Well,
like I said, this whole society thing have men thinking they need to be superheroes, and like you said, they're
mhm,
human too. So what type of
yep.
protein you
Well,
think?
I highly recommend lowering your red meat intake because of that one factor that I discussed earlier. There's a number of proteins and a number of saturated fats that are in meat that are not good for the human cardiovasculature. So that's the major reason. In terms of foods to move towards, you want to move towards foods that give you, and then particularly as you age, because as you age, you really want to eat foods that are more protective of your cardiovasculature,
Right.
more protective of your organ systems. One of the things that happens that as we age, we start to build up. We have a number of insults that hit us as we age, and so food is very, very important. So, for instance, we can build up as we age, particularly after the age of 40. You start to build up what's called more free radicals within your system. And what free radicals are, they're basically just unstable versions of oxygen. And it's been shown chemically that unstable versions of oxygen, once they are produced, they can bind to proteins, and proteins consist throughout your body in every organ, and actually can change how proteins function and work. And that's actually part of the natural aging process, by the way. So what you want to be able to do is to really have foods that can reduce or delay the effects of free radicals. And free radicals can actually um, start a process where it can break down tissue. It can break down cell function. So if you can start to reduce free radicals or limit their action, then you become more in a protective state of your health. And that's the whole goal. You want to have a mindset to be in a preventative state of health. So, and foods can play a big part of that. So, so you want to have foods and I always, to keep it simple, look at foods that have strong dark colors. Like, so if you look at foods like beets, if you look at foods like carrots, carrots are
Hmm.
full of things, beta carotene, which are anti-cancer agents. So same as in beets, you have a tremendous amount of fiber, which is also good for flushing toxins out of the system. And also has compounds like betanin, and betanin is also a free radical scavenger, or it can actually capture these free radicals and give your body protection against the action of free radicals. And so look for those types of foods. Look for foods that have high iron and trace metals. Foods that are high in iron and copper, like green leafy foods, spinach. The thing about spinach has iron, and it has copper, which is good for the skin. The other aspect of spinach has protein. So a lot of people say, well, if I'm not going to eat meat, where am I going to get my protein from? Plants have protein. So plants have amino acids.
Yes, they do.
So I would go with that. And then the third thing is for those of you that can eat shellfish or eat fish, you're not allergic to fish, consume as much seafood. Seafood is really, really good for you because it actually has a lot of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, which are the good fatty acids that you need that are anti-inflammatory, and those protect the heart. So eat a lot of seafood. Eat as much seafood as you want. And I think that's a very, very strong thing to do. So those would be the simple recommendations. And I said this in earlier broadcasts. Start with the simple things and then build from there. And for me, like I kind of come back to what I do. So for me, I do a lot of green leafy vegetables. I do a lot of seafood. I've greatly reduced my red meat intake, and I think that's highly, highly important. But I want to add on one other thing. So we talk about those simple things to do in food. Get some physical activity. Movement is extremely important because one of the things that it really does, it gets your blood flow going. It gets the distribution of nutrients going. It gets your digestive system going. So those things are very, very important. It also is good on stimulating brain function in terms of physical activity, and it also stimulates your immune function. So it allows you to have a stronger immune system. So it's very important for health, men and women's health, to look at the food component, look at your physical activity component. That physical activity component is so important because if you're able to even drop as much as 10 pounds, it has a profound effect on your heart rate and on your blood pressure. And all of those things put us at more peak performance for other activities in our lives. So, sexually. So everything that I just told you has a profound effect when it links over to the whole aspect of sexual function. So that's why you want to do those things. So you want to be the best version of you in every aspect of your life. And like I said, since this topic is going towards men's sexual health, that's what these things impact.
So everyone, it's been a great conversation. Thank you again, Dr. Gabriel. For next time, like I always tell everyone, live life with intention, purpose, and love. Appreciate you. Thank you. ACW is presented by Partnerships in Fitness, a fitness and health and wellness consulting group, building strong minds and bodies, and empowering one community at a time. Please follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and subscribe to our Pif Nola YouTube channel, and leave questions or comments. ACW is sponsored by Jabati. Self-care through skincare. Jabati is for everybody.